The lonely highway. It was late, maybe around 2 or 3 in the morning, the kind of time when the roads are empty and the world feels like it's holding its breath. For James, a trucker with over a decade of experience, driving the quiet, desolate highways was nothing new. He was used to long stretches of empty road, the only company being the rhythmic hum of the truck's engine. His rig was loaded with cargo bound for the next state over, and he had a good few hundred miles ahead of him. The truck's headlights sliced through the dark, illuminating the highway ahead, but this stretch was different. It felt strange, the way the trees on either side of the road leaned in so closely, almost like they were watching. A chill ran down James' spine. He couldn't explain it, but the air was thick, heavy with a sense of unease. It wasn't like anything he had experienced on this road before dawn. As he drove deeper into the night, a faint flicker of light appeared in his rearview mirror. At first, James thought it was just another truck coming up behind him. But as the seconds passed, he realized the light was moving too fast for it to be any ordinary vehicle. A sense of dread clawed at him as he watched the light grow closer, almost as if the driver was intentionally speeding to catch up with him. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared on the side of the road. He couldn't make out much of the man, but he looked tall, gaunt, and wearing a weathered jacket. No lights on his bike or car, just standing there in the dark, staring into the headlights. James had been on the road long enough to know not to stop for hitchhikers, especially not at this hour. It wasn't safe, and it wasn't worth the risk. He honked his horn just to make sure the man knew he wasn't interested. But then something happened that made James' heart race. The man didn't flinch. He didn't even move. It was like he was a part of the road itself, frozen in place. James' pulse quickened. Something about the man's stillness didn't sit right with him. He continued driving, trying to focus on the road, but the feeling of being watched never left. It stayed with him, gnawing at the back of his mind. He glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the man standing there, but he was gone as James tried to shake off the unease. He pressed harder on the gas pedal, eager to get to the next exit. But then, in his mirror, he saw something that made his heart race in his chest. The man was no longer standing on the side of the road. He was walking, but not walking in the normal way. It was more like he was gliding across the asphalt, his legs moving unnaturally fast, too fast for a person. James could feel his skin go cold. What was going on? Was he seeing things? The truck seemed to be responding slower than usual. James pushed harder on the accelerator, but it felt as if something was holding him back. The man, if he was even. A man was closing in on him, moving faster and faster. James looked ahead, panic rising in his chest. His head spun as he tried to think of a way out, but his truck wasn't responding. He glanced back again, and for a brief moment, the figure disappeared. 1 second, he was there, the next gone. It didn't make sense. The truck was still struggling to respond, and now the air around him felt thick and suffocating. He floored the pedal, desperate to get away, but then a voice crackled through the radio. "James, you should have stopped." James froze. His blood ran cold. How did they know his name? Who was that? He didn't stop to ask questions. He kept driving, never once looking back again. But even as he made his way toward the next rest stop, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still following him, something he couldn't see, but could always feel lurking just behind him. When James pulled into the next truck stop, he tried to calm himself. It was only a few hours to daylight. As he walked toward the diner to get some coffee, he overheard a conversation between the cashier and a trucker who'd just come in. The trucker had pulled in with the same type of rig, and according to the cashier, the trucker had been asking about him. "Is that your truck out there?" The cashier had asked James, her face pale. "There was a guy who looked just like you who..." Came in a while ago. Same truck, same everything. He said he was waiting for you. James froze. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. He'd been alone on that highway. There was no other trucker. Not until he had pulled in. The night was far from over. But now, James would never drive that lonely highway again. The phantom CB radio. Mike had been driving for hours, as he usually did. The steady hum of the truck and the occasional crackle of the CB radio were his only company on the long stretches of highway. He had been on the road for more than a decade, and the quiet of the night didn't bother him. He actually preferred it. The only thing that made him uneasy was the lack of other vehicles, but that was just part of the job. Tonight, however, something was different. As Mike flipped through the channels, he heard a faint crackle on one of them. It was almost imperceptible at first, like static. He was about to turn it off when a voice cut through the airwaves, low and chilling. "Mike, we're waiting for you." Mike's heart skipped a beat. His eyes darted to the radio. He didn't know who could have been on the other end. There was no way anyone could have known his name. He tried to dismiss it as some weird glitch or interference. But as he continued driving, the voice came through again, clearer this time. "Mike, we're still waiting for you." The voice was calm, almost too calm. It sounded too perfect. He checked his mirrors, but there was no one else on the road. Just the endless stretch of asphalt cutting through the dark night. The radio fell. Silent for a few moments, and Mike tried to shake off the unease. He figured it was just a prank. A bored trucker on the other end with nothing better to do. He laughed it off, but deep down, he couldn't ignore the cold feeling creeping over him. The next few nights were the same. Whenever Mike would flip through the channels, the same voice would crackle through the static. The voice never wavered, always calm and collected. Each time, it seemed like the person on the other end knew exactly where he was. "We're waiting, Mike." It was becoming too much for him to ignore. The strange thing was, the voice never seemed to fade or grow distant. It felt like it was getting closer, even though no other trucks were ever around. One night, Mike pulled over to a truck stop and tried to put the strange experience out of his mind. He grabbed a coffee, hoping it would calm his nerves, but as he stepped out of the truck, something caught his eye. Another truck had parked next to him, but this one was unlike any truck he'd seen before. It had no license plate. Mike's heart raced as he approached the strange vehicle, but as he got closer, he saw something that made his stomach drop. The truck's windows were covered with dark curtains, and there was something off about the shape of the rig. It didn't look right. It was as if the truck was too old, too decrepit. There was something unnatural about it. Before he could get a better look, a cold voice echoed through his own truck's CB, louder than ever before. "You can't escape us, Mike. We know where you are." His breath caught in his throat. The truck was empty, but the voice was unmistakable. He turned around to get back to his cab, but when he glanced over his shoulder, the strange truck was gone, vanished. Just like that, Mike never drove the lonely highways at night again. The voices never stopped, and he knew deep down that whoever or whatever was calling to him was still out there, waiting for him. The roadside motel. Rick had been driving for hours, the tiredness creeping up on him with every mile. The road was empty, and the miles seemed endless. He needed a break, and when he saw the dim lights of a motel in the distance, he decided to pull over. It was the only place for miles, and it seemed like a safe bet to get some rest. The motel was small, run down, and looked like it had seen better days. The neon sign flickered above the door, casting an eerie glow. Rick didn't mind. It was just a place to sleep for a few hours. He went inside to check in, and the clerk, a quiet man with dark eyes, handed him a key without much conversation. Rick didn't think much of it. He had been on the road long enough to know that some truck stops were stranger than others. The room was small, with faded wallpaper and an old creaky bed. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Rick to get some rest. He lay down, closing his eyes and letting the hum of the air conditioning lull him to sleep. It wasn't until a few hours later that something woke him. There was a knock on the door. Soft, almost tentative. Rick rubbed his eyes, confused. Who could be knocking at this hour? He wasn't expecting anyone. He got up and opened the door to find no one there. He stepped outside and looked around, but the parking lot was empty. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning unit. He shook his head, dismissing it as his mind playing tricks on him. But as he turned to go back inside, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure standing just outside the lot, motioning for him to come closer. Rick felt a chill race down his spine. There was something about the figure that didn't seem right. It was too still, too unnatural. He hesitated, but then, against his better judgment, took a few steps toward the figure. As he got closer, he realized that something was terribly wrong. The person wasn't wearing shoes. Their feet were bare, but not just bare, twisted, pale, and wrong. The skin looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in years, and their toes were curled at odd angles. Rick froze in place. He turned to head back to his room, but the door slammed shut behind him. He tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic rose in his chest as he realized the door was locked from the inside, trapping him. The clerk appeared in the window, a twisted grin on his face. "Welcome to the last stop, Rick," the man said, his voice low and cold. Rick never left the motel. They were waiting for him, and they would always be waiting. The vanishing road. It had been a long day on the road for Charlie. As a seasoned trucker, he was used to the monotonous stretches of highway and the solitary life behind the wheel. After a few days of grueling driving, he was looking forward to the final leg of his trip, and the rest stopped just up ahead. The sky was dark, and a storm was on the horizon, but Charlie wasn't worried. He had driven through worse. He could feel the weight of his eyelids as he fought to stay awake, the hours dragging by like minutes. The truck's headlights lit up the road ahead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into the unknown. It was about 2 a.m. when he first noticed the road ahead starting to change. The signs became blurry, almost unreadable, and the road seemed to narrow in a way that felt off at first. Charlie thought it was just his fatigue playing tricks on him. Maybe he was imagining things. But as he kept driving, the feeling grew stronger. The road, the surroundings, everything felt different. He looked at his GPS, but it was glitching random lines, static, and no clear direction. He wasn't sure if he was hallucinating or if the system had gone haywire, but something wasn't right. The truck hummed along, but the road seemed to twist unnaturally ahead of him. There was no other vehicle in sight, no signs of life. He pressed on, knowing he had to find a stop soon, but there were no exits, no towns, nothing. Just an endless road stretching ahead with no end in sight. The trees beside him seemed to lean in closer, as though they were closing in on him, like the road itself was slowly enveloping him. Minutes turned into hours, or so it felt. The clock on the dashboard was flashing, its numbers no longer reliable. The headlights cut through a dense fog that had rolled in, thick and suffocating. It was as if Charlie had entered some otherworldly space, a road that didn't belong in this reality. Then, suddenly, a sign appeared. It was the kind of sign you'd normally see just before an exit, except it was blank. No town name, no direction. Just a faded green sign with a strange symbol he didn't recognize. He slammed on the brakes, but the truck didn't respond as it should have. The wheels screeched against the road as the truck jerked forward. The fog seemed to pulse, closing in tighter, and for the first time in his life, Charlie felt true terror dot in the distance. There was a small light, a faint glow that beckoned him. His body screamed to turn around, but something compelled him to keep going. It was as if the road itself had chosen him, drawing him toward the light. Charlie approached slowly, his fingers gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. The light grew brighter until it was blinding, and then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. The road was gone. In its place was a dense, black void, stretching endlessly in all directions. Charlie stared, frozen in fear, and suddenly there was a voice, soft, almost a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here." The fog swirled around him, and before he could react, his truck was yanked backward, spinning out of control. Charlie screamed as the truck careened through the dark, the void stretching in every direction. When the truck finally came to a stop, Charlie found himself back on a normal stretch of highway, unfamiliar but still real. The fog had lifted, the eerie silence replaced by the hum of the engine. His GPS was working again, the clock was ticking, and the road stretched on as it should have. But Charlie knew deep down that he had crossed into something he shouldn't have. And now, the road would never let him go. The truck stopped in the middle of nowhere. Jack had been driving for hours, long past his normal shift. The miles stretched on endlessly, and the fatigue was starting to hit him hard. He had to pull over for a break, but there was nothing on the map. He hadn't passed a gas station or rest stop in over 100 miles. The road was desolate, with nothing but the occasional eerie silhouette of a distant building. He figured he'd find something soon. After all, there had to be a rest stop somewhere, right? Then, just as he was starting to doubt he would find anything, a sign appeared on the side of the road, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a small, faded green sign that read, "Truck stop to 1 mile." Jack sighed in relief and pushed the accelerator harder, eager to stretch his legs and grab something to eat. The truck stop appeared out of nowhere. It was the kind of place that looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. The neon lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie, sickly glow across the lot. There was a single old gas pump in front of the building. The diner windows were fogged up, and the whole place had a rundown feel. Jack parked the truck and stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. The place was empty, no other trucks, no other vehicles. A chill crept down his spine as he walked inside the diner. The door creaked when he opened it, and the bell above it rang faintly. Inside, the diner was dimly lit. There was a single waitress behind the counter. She was older, with a stern face and pale skin that looked like it had never seen sunlight. She didn't smile as Jack sat down, but simply took his order for a coffee and a sandwich. Jack looked around the diner. There was something unsettling about it. The place seemed frozen in time. The booths were old, the tables scratched and worn. The air smelled faintly of grease and stale coffee. But what really got to him was the silence. There was no sound of the kitchen, no radio in the background, nothing. Just an unnerving quiet. He tried to make small talk with the waitress, but she responded with nothing more than short, monotone answers. Her eyes didn't meet his, instead staying locked on the counter. Jack started to feel uncomfortable, as if he was intruding on something he shouldn't have. When the sandwich arrived, Jack picked at it absently. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He glanced out the window, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw movement, a figure standing by the truck. His stomach dropped. But when he looked again, there was nothing there. Jack didn't finish his meal. He paid for the coffee and left the diner, but the strange feeling only grew stronger as he stepped back outside. He hurried to his truck, eager to leave, but just as he got to the door, something stopped him. He turned around. The diner was gone. The building had vanished, leaving only an empty stretch of highway and the truck stop sign. The gas pump stood alone, and everything around it was dark, quiet. Jack looked around, his heart racing. There was no trace of the diner, the waitress, or the truck stop. It was as if the whole place had never existed. He quickly climbed into his truck and slammed the door shut. His hands shook as he started the engine, desperate to get out of there. The road ahead was empty, no other cars, no signs of life. As he sped away, Jack dared to look back one last time, but there was nothing. The place was gone, swallowed up by the endless stretch of dark highway. For the rest of his life, Jack would never understand what had happened that night. He had seen the diner with his own eyes, but when he told others about it, no one believed him. No one had heard of the truck stop, and no one knew where it had been. It was as if the place had never existed at all, but Jack knew the truth. He had stumbled upon a place in between, a place that should never have been found. Thank you for watching Flesh Glitch. Sleep tight, darlings.